Today's video, I want to see if I could install a mountain bike 2x crankset onto a cyclocross or road bike, because typically the road bike cranksets are for compact. The smallest you get is a 3450, or if you go by like the gravel, you get a 3046, and that's typically the lowest that we see for gravel bikes. However, if you like to spin a lot and go up steep inclines, you probably want a little lower gears. So here I have my 2x XO Truvativ crankset. You could use hopefully any mountain bike crankset, and it's a 26. So going from a 34 down to 26 should be a significant drop and get lower gears. Cross bike has a standard 68mm English threaded bottom bracket, and hopefully that will fit a mountain bike bottom bracket. Typically the mountain bike bottom brackets are 73mm wide, and this is 68mm wide, so you're going to need some spacers. With these mountain bike 24mm crank spacers and also bottom bracket spacers, I think these bottom bracket spacers are going to make the biggest difference. As you can tell, they have a larger inner diameter, and they go in between the bottom bracket to make it wider to accommodate for larger shell bottom brackets on a smaller frame. These spacers are going to go inside here, and so that from a road, if it's 68mm and it pushes out, it'll push out to 73mm with two spacers, two 2.5mm spacers. Is a front derailleur mount, so I have a clamp on front derailleur which could go lower onto the frame set, because if you have smaller rings up front, then you're going to want to drop this front derailleur lower. However, if you have a braze on and it's attached to the frame, you're going to need, or you may need, an adapter to lower the braze on clamp. So it'll attach here, then lower it. There'll be another braze on sticking out, and then you could clamp it on lower. The braze on adapter, or you don't have a round seat tube, then it's going to be a little harder to mount a front derailleur. So you could consider a 1x option as well. Option is chain line. Road bike chain rings and gravel bike chain lines, they're closer into the frame. However, mountain bike are typically further out because they have to accommodate a larger rear tire. The bigger the tire is, then the chain has to come out, because if it's too far into the frame here, then the chain could actually rub the tire here. So that's why they call a chain line, is the millimeters outboard from the bottom bracket. I don't know if it's going to work with the chain line differences, the smaller rings. That's why I'm making this video, just to see if I could install it. I'll go ahead and take everything apart on the crankset, uninstall the bottom bracket, and start to install the new one, and see if I could get any shifting out of it that works. If not, then you might also need a new front derailleur that's mountain bike specific as well. After you remove the crankset, that would be a good time to go ahead and clean out the bottom bracket. I already cleaned it out a little bit. So if there's crud in there, just go ahead, wipe it out, use a little degreaser if you need to, and clean it up to prep the install of the new bottom bracket. Like bottom bracket, this is the drive side, and it goes on the right. Sorry, that's the non-drive side. It's actually, so if you're facing the bike, it goes this way, so that the crankset can come in like this onto the bike. And I'm going to want to put the spacers probably on the non-drive side, which is to my left here, and put this side as close as I can into the frame. The bottom bracket stock, and then I'm going to need two spacers, so one there, and I'm actually going to try both of them on the non-drive side, and it looks and appears that there's still enough thread engagement where you could get a solid connection on the bottom bracket. However, this is not recommended or advised by any manufacturer, so do this at your own risk. It's probably advisable at this time to go ahead, apply some grease. You could use your favorite grease and go ahead, grease up the threads. I got the threads greased. I'm going to go ahead, put the spacers on one side, and then it's going to install into the bike like this with the crankset on the right side. Pulling the bottom bracket, to install it onward, it's the opposite direction of wheel travel for installation. So if the wheel travels this way to go forward, you're going to go backwards, the reverse direction of the wheels, to install the bottom bracket. This is opposite of the pedals, so that's how I kind of remember. And then after tightening it on a little bit, I have my tool that fits on here, and then I could go ahead and tighten the bottom bracket onto the frame. Park BBT9, I'm not sponsored by them or anything, so go ahead, use whatever tool that you like. Drive side with the two spacers, notice it sticks out quite a bit, and this is already tightened. Also, this side also has an arrow to show the tighten direction. On the non-drive side, the bike is facing forward, upward. So you go the opposite direction of the wheel travel to tighten the bottom bracket. And right now it's pretty secure. You move the chain over the bottom bracket, and then you can go ahead and put the crankset in and see if it pushes all the way through. On drive side, because with these SRAMs, don't forget the spacer, this GXP spacer here. There's two sides, so make sure it goes on the proper way. It should just slide right on in. Oop. And I guess you're supposed to hold the crank. Slide that on. Go ahead and put the crankset over and in, and then use an 8mm Allen for this type of crankset to go ahead and screw the crank onto the bottom bracket. Well, close to the bottom bracket. It will actually be on the crank arm itself. I was able to install the crankset onto the bike, and with the spacers in and out, well, I guess I could tighten it just a little bit more. It should be snug so it doesn't rotate left and right. Did rotate a little bit. I'm using a crank arm spacer. It's just 1mm. I could use another one if I need to stick on the non-drive side, and then go ahead and reinstall that left crank arm again. 1mm spacer. I go back and forth and it's secured. It's not clicking back and forth. So now I have to go see if I can lower the front derailleur and get it to shift with the front crankset. I'm in first gear in the back, and it looks like there is clearance. However, it could go out another millimeter, but first let me go ahead and lower this front derailleur and see if I could go adjust it. Put it down, and initially it's not enough to shift up to the large chainring. There's not enough throw on the front derailleur. The step I took was to loosen this high limit screw quite a bit, and I also tightened the front derailleur quite a bit. As you can see now, when I shift up to front gear, it still barely clears it, but going down, also not too big of a problem. And maybe that's also because of the Q-rings, that shifts a little less solidly. Oh, shifted up perfect that time. Go back. So it does shift. You may benefit from a new front derailleur that's mountain bike, because it swings out just a little bit further. Came back from a test ride and took this out, went up some steep hills, came on back, and I noticed a few things with this mountain bike crank on a bike designed for a road or 68mm bottom bracket. The first thing is that on the biggest chain ring, when I go from the biggest ring to the very smallest, it rubs a little bit. So I think a little more tweaking with the front derailleur needs to be done in order to get it to shift better. And the second thing is, because the left crank arm is outbound 5mm, when I stand up, I could feel that my leg is slightly out, or the power is a little different. However, that also might have to do with the Q-rings that I'm not used to yet. Question: can you install a mountain bike crankset onto a road or gravel bike? Yes, you can. And if you have the 68mm standard road bottom bracket or the GXP or English threading, you could install the mountain bike version that's 73mm long with 5mm of spacers. However, the shifting is not going to be ideal, and this mountain bike crankset is more suited specifically for the mountain bikes. Do hope you enjoyed this video, and here's another look at the mountain bike crankset on a cyclocross bike. If you did enjoy it, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching through this if you've got this far, and have a most wonderful day.